Let me see here. Let me get it on here for the people viewing and listening really quick. Yeah, I'm going to change it to Charles Thompson for Second Kings. Let's see here. Where are we here? Okay, Charles Thompson. I think I'll do the Son of Man Bible for the Masoretic. All right. Let me see here. Let me get it on here for. All right, we're back on, everyone. And Brother Joshua's going to be reading 2 Kings 23 for us. Let me just get this on the screen here, and then you can go ahead. All right, whenever you're ready, bro.
So the king sent and assembled before him all the elders of Yehuda and Yerushalayim, and the king went up to the house of Yahuwah, accompanied by all the chiefs of Yehuda and all the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, with the Kahanim and the Nabai, or the prophets, and all the people, small and great. And when he had read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of Yahuwah, the king stood before the pillar and made a covenant in the presence of Yahuwah to follow Yahuwah, to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and with all his soul, to conform to the terms of the covenant, the things written in the book. And all the people joined in the covenant. Then the king ordered Hilkiah the high Kahanim, or the high Kahan and the Kahanim of the second order, and them who had the charge of the weights, to bring out the temple of Yahuwah, all the utensils which were made for Baal and for the bower. I don't know what that word means. And for all the host of Shamaim, and he burned them without Yerushalayim at Sidmoth Kidron, and sent the ashes thereof to Bethel. He burned also the Kamarim. Give me 1 second. I want to see what that word is for Kamarim. Okay, so he burned the I don't know if that's a Greek word that he inserted there or if it's a Hebrew word, but he burned the idolatrous priests. So he burned the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Yehuda had appointed. These were they who burned incense on the high places, and in the cities of Yehuda and in the high places around Yerushalayim he burned them also, who offered incense to Baal and to the sun and the moon and the signs in the zodiac, and to all the host of Shamaim, and brought out the bower out of the house of Yahuwah without Yerushalayim to the brook Kidron, and having burned it by the brook Kidron, he ground it to powder and strewed the powder over the graves of the children of the people. He pulled down also the house of Kadisim in the house of Yahuwah, where the women wove hangings for the bower. Then he brought. Okay, so that word it's just, I guess, another word for grove. Wove tents for the grove, wherever it's saying bower. It's weird. I've never heard of that word. Then he brought up all the Kahanim out of the cities of Yehuda and defiled the high places where the Kahanim burned incense from Gebal to Bersabi. He demolished also the house of the gates, which was at the door of the gate of Yahusha, the governor of the city, on the left of a man entering at the gate of the city. But the Kahanim of the high places did not go up to the altar of Yahuwah at Yerushalayim, where they only ate unleavened bread among their brethren. He denied also Tapheth, which was set apart for in the valley of the son of Enam, for a man to cause his son or his daughter to pass through fire to Malak. And he burned the houses which the kings of Yehuda had dedicated to the sun at the entrance of the house of Yahuwah, at the treasury office of Nathan, the king's chamberlain, at Paraphim. He burned also with fire the chariot of the sun, and the altars which were on the roof of Akaz's chamber, which the kings of Yehuda had erected. So I just want to point something out here real quick. Because I've seen somebody say that the book of Hanuk is not legit, because it has talks about the chariots of the sun, and right here he uses this instance saying he burned also with fire the chariot of the sun. But we're not to make a image of anything. Even if it was just the sun, he would have burned the sun even if it didn't have a chariot, because we're not to make graven images and bow down to any type of image, whether it's the chariot of the sun or whether it's just the sun, period. So that's not a argument, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to add to your point on that. Then you got to throw out the Bible too. You got to throw out the canon too, because his Malachim have chariots. So if you're going to say that's not biblical, that's pagan in origin, then you have to say what chapter is that? 2 Kings 1, where Elisha asks Yahuwah to open his servant's eyes, then they see chariots of fire for the Malachim. So that there's actual canonical material that agrees with Enoch, to Brother Joshua's point on the chariots. So chariots are real, like heavenly bodies have chariots. That's in my opinion, that's where people are actually seeing these UFOs. They're actually chariots of fire. I believe that's what I was hinting to before with this whole alien agenda. I really think what these people are doing, they're replacing fallen angels, fallen Malachim with aliens and UFOs. When you look at scripture, chariots are mentioned a lot of times. I forget if Ezekiel's vision might mention, I don't know, I don't think so, but I know that Malachim have chariots, so I have no problem, in my opinion, believing the sun would have a chariot in reality. So, but yeah.
And the altars which were on the roof of Akaz's chamber, which the kings of Yehuda had erected. And he pulled down the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of Yahuwah. And having dragged them out thence piecemeal, he threw the rubbish of them into the brook Kidron. The king defiled the house. The king defiled also the house which was in front of Jerusalem, that which was on the right of Mount Mustah, which Shlomo, king of Yasharal, had built for Astarte, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chamos, the abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites. And when he had broken in pieces the pillars and utterly destroyed the groves and filled their places with human bones, he then tore down also the altar which was at Bethel, that high altar which was erected by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had caused Yasharal to sin. Even that high altar he tore down and broke the stones thereof to pieces, and pounded them to dust, and burned the grove. Now when Uzziah turned and saw the graves which were there in the city, he sent and took the bones out of the graves and burned them on the altar, and polluted it according to the word of Yahuwah, which the man of Yahuwah spoke when Jeroboam was standing on the altar at the festival. Then turning, he cast his eyes on the tomb of the man of Yahuwah. This is, if y'all want to look at it later, 2 Kings 23:16 is a Thube instance of where the Charles Thompson makes it very easy to follow along with. Which the man of Yahuwah spoke when Jeroboam was standing on the altar at the festival. Then turning, he cast his eyes on the tomb of the man of Yahuwah who spoke these words, and he said, "What monument is that which I see?" And when the men of the city said, "It is the man of Eluah who came from Yehuda to denounce, and who denounced these very things against this altar at Bethel," he said, "Let him alone. Let no man move his bones." So his bones escaped with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. All the houses also of the high places which were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Yasharal had built to provoke Yahuwah, Yeshua removed, and did to them all that he had done at Bethel. And when he had offered all the Kahanim of the high places who were there over the altars and burned the bones of men upon them. He returned to Jerusalem. Then the king issued orders to all the people, saying, celebrate the Passover to Yahuwah our Eloah, as it is written in the book of this covenant. For from the days of the judges who judged Yasharal, there had not been during all the days of the kings of Yasharal and the kings of Yehuda such a Psach as this was, as this which was kept to Yahuwah in Jerusalem in the 18th year of Yeshaiah. For Yeshaiah removed all the devotees and the diviners and the teraphim and the idols and all the abominations which were in the land of Yehuda and in Jerusalem, that he might conform to the words of the Torah which were written in the book which Hilkiah the Kahan had found in the house of Yahuwah. Like him, there was no king before him who turned to Yahuwah with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, according to the Torah of Moshe. Nor did there arise after him any one like him. Nevertheless, Yahuwah turned not from the fervency of his great wrath, with which he was incensed against Yehuda at the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. So Yahuwah said, I will remove Yehuda also from my presence, as I have removed Yasharal, and I will cast off the city of Jerusalem, which I chose, and this house of which I said, my name shall be there. Now the rest of the acts of Yeshaiah and all that he did, are they not written in the journal of the kings of Yehuda? In those days, when Pharaoh Necho, king of Mitzrayim, was going up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, Yeshaiah went out to meet him. And Necho slew him at Megiddo when he saw him. So here's just an instance of Yahuwah reigns upon the just and the unjust. And his servants took him up mortally wounded at Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Yochaz, son of Yeshaiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead. Sorry, that's not a good example of what I just said, but it is an example of, like, you see this righteous king that was completely righteous get killed, get slain. I think when it says that he reigns upon the righteous and the unrighteous, it's talking about barakas, but so it would be the opposite. But yeah, just because he was righteous doesn't. I don't know, Doug, can you expound on that? I'm having trouble getting my words out. If you understand what I'm trying to say in that point. Or you can expound on it later. So Jehoiakim was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Amital. She was a daughter of Jeremiah of Labna. He did that which was evil in the sight of Yahuwah, according to all that his forefathers had done. So when Pharaoh Necho was at Rablam in the land of Emath, he removed him from reigning in Jerusalem and imposed as a fine on the land 100 talents of silver and 100 talents of gold. And having made Eliakim, son of Yeshaiah, king of Yehuda, king over them in the room of his father Yeshaiah, Pharaoh Necho changed his name to Jehoiakim, and he took Jehoiakim and carried him to Mitzrayim, and he died there. And Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh. Moreover, he assessed the land to give the money at the command of Pharaoh. Every man of rank, according to his assessment, gave with the people of the land silver and gold to be given to Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim reigns in Yehuda. So Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jeeldath. She was the daughter of Badal of Rumah, and he did evil in the sight of Yahuwah, according to all that his forefathers had done. All right. So is it just 23, or is it 23 and 24, or just 23?
23.
All right, that's it.
Yeah.
Interesting what happens in the next chapter.
Well, what's interesting here is that this is what I like historically, that our brother Zachary Bauer did a video about exposing Easter and showing that, yeah, if you're gonna be a person that's using a chart talking about different cultures had different same story for the flood and all that, but then when it comes to your beloved Easter, you want to ignore that, that's kind of ridiculous. And what I mean by that is these Christian historians, they can take a chart that shows every civilization had a deluge or flood story,
Yeah.
that all coincides. But once that same chart has a graph for the moon goddess Ishtar Ashtoreth, that's when Christians want to, put their hands on their ears. They don't want to hear that Easter goes back to Ashtoreth, to Astarte in the Greek. Okay, there's many different names for that moon goddess. Okay, that's the same person, just different names. Isis, Semiramis in the Babylonian, Roman would have been Aphrodite, I think. Then the Greek is Diana. So the Ephesians called her Diana. This is the same woman, by the way. This is the same false moon goddess that's being talked about in this chapter. Ashtoreth, Astarte, whatever you want to call her. She's the same person. And by the way, Astarte goes back to Easter. I find it interesting. The Septuagint has the closest to our Anglo-Saxon Easter or Ishtar. So find it interesting how close the English is to the Greek. So let's see here. Yeah, the Bowers are definitely referring to the groves. By the way, FYI, grove is just like this Septuagint version of Ashtoreth pole. That's what a grove is. So that's referring to Ashtoreth or Ishtar when it's talking about the groves. Host of heaven, obviously most of us that have seen the study we've done about who the host stars are, the host of heaven, they're angels. So they, at this point in time, they were worshiping angels, which is not too far from the imagination. You'll see in certain versions of Exodus that the Egyptians even worshipped angels. And there's a funny paraphrase of the Targum where Moshe goes up to Pharaoh and Pharaoh says, who's Yahuwah? He's not in the book of the angels. So the angel worship, host of heaven worship was very popular in the pagan ancient world, in the polytheistic world. The worship of the stars, aka the angels, was very popular in these false religions. Baal, obviously, we know who a Baal is. Baal is the same guy as Osiris. What other names? Saturn, El, Kronos. You can go down the whole list. So him and Ashtaroth were worshipped by the Israelites at this point. They were, pretty much apostate at this point. They were worshiping the sun god. They were not worshiping Yahuwah anymore. I think this would be around the same time, right, as that point in Jeremiah where it talks about they baked cakes to the Queen of Heaven.
I think so.
This would have been like the same time period as Jeremiah 7, if I'm not mistaken. So at this time period, they're so apostate at this point.
I find it interesting that the kings whose mothers were involved, they did wicked.
Oh yeah.
So these
Solomon's mom
weren't of any kind of.
Solomon's mom would have been dead though by the time he's doing what he's doing. When we look at when exactly his books were written, and by the time he became apostate, his mom and his dad are both dead. King Solomon.
Yeah,
so his mom would have not been aware of what he was doing with his wives, allowing his pagan wives to get him to worship Ashtaroth. So, and that's something that's something that Satan seems to creep into the body of Messiah with, is this stupid feminine divine garbage. And don't think you're out of the realm of being deceived, okay? Solomon himself, a great king of Israel, was deceived into worshiping the Queen of Heaven. Don't think any of us are absolved from being deceived by this feminine, divine feminine garbage heresy. Yeah. So, okay, there was Israelites that knew the Torah like the back of their hand that fell and started worshiping Ashtaroth, Semiramis. So we're definitely not absolved from that deception. let's see. He puts away the witches. Yep, because they're in the land. He's able to kill witches. He's able to do all that it says in the Torah in the Book of the Covenant. According to all the law of Moshe, nor did there arise after him anyone like him. So I guess Josiah seems to be the last of the kings that actually served Yahuwah 110% with his whole heart, not just partially. Because you'll see other kings that kind of repent, or there's other righteous kings that will say he didn't serve Yahuwah fully with his whole heart. Like there was still like certain things certain kings didn't do, like they didn't remove the high places, certain kings of Judah. So they're kind of partially serving Yahuwah with their heart and not fully. What I also wanted to touch on historically is this is interesting. Pharaoh Necho seems to come into the picture here. So this seems to be a little bit after the other Pharaoh that people claim Ezekiel 29 references a different Pharaoh, supposedly. Certain commentaries say it's not Necho, it is Ezekiel 29, where the Pharaoh is being referred to as the great dragon. So if that's the case, then it seems like 2 Kings 23 is a little bit after Ezekiel 29. If not, then it would be around the same time period, and Necho would be the same Pharaoh in Ezekiel 29. But the supposable tradition, according to certain commentators, like the Hebraic Roots Bible commentator, they'll say, oh, well, that this was the Pharaoh before Necho in Ezekiel 29. So, I mean, that takes a whole nother day to really figure out how accurate that is and whether Necho would have not been Pharaoh back then in the no, sis, that's not Pharaoh Necho. Jasher is not referring to this time period. We're just talking about that Pharaoh. The Pharaoh that Jasher is referring to would be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. A lot of what Jasher says about that Pharaoh is actually the Pharaoh that Moshe, had problems with. It was that time period where it talks about that specific Pharaoh, was killing babies, drinking their blood, doing a lot of adrenochrome type of stuff. That is echoed in the Targums as well, that it was Moshe's time period. It was that Pharaoh that supposedly, according to Judean tradition, historical tradition, was happening. But yeah, it would have been the Pharaoh of the Exodus. It would have not been this Pharaoh. This Pharaoh's way after that time period. This is like what, Mom, like 600 BC, 700 BC?
I would imagine, about that.
So yeah, way, like a couple centuries after Moshe's time period. This mind you, this is like after Solomon's already dead. That 2 Kings 23 is talking about. This is way after Moshe's time period. So mainly that Pharaoh that's talked about in Jasher, for the most part, is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, for the most part. What Jasher says about that particular Pharaoh, it has a lot of historical legends and expoundings about Job and what he was like being an attendant under that particular Pharaoh of the Exodus before he converted. And, a lot of people don't realize that, but yeah, there's a lot of extra biblical sources that show that Job wasn't always a Hebrew, quote unquote. He actually had a dark past. And he was known as Jobab, I think was his original Edomite name, Jobab. So that you'll see that in the book of Genesis, he's named Jobab. A lot of people don't realize that because the Masoretic version of Job omits a huge paragraph from the last chapter of Job in Job 41. In your Masoretic text Bibles, there's a huge paragraph that's in the Greek Septuagint version that the Masoretic leaves out. My assumption is that the rabbis didn't like that he was an ethnic Edomite that crossed over to become a Hebrew. They would not like that because even in Yahusha's time, it's like, we're the children of Abraham. Yeah. So like not realizing that an ancestor, a spiritual ancestor of theirs, Job, was not of their bloodline and was considered a righteous man when he converted and started following Yahuwah. He was actually considered righteous. So that, they didn't like the grafted in concept even back then. There's nothing new under the sun. So I wouldn't be surprised that's why they got rid of that part of Job. But yeah, so anyway, so but Nico is basically the pharaoh, if I'm not mistaken, around the time of Nebuchadnezzar. He's the pharaoh of Egypt that the Israelites go back to. There's in Jeremiah, right, Mom? There's a chapter where Yahuwah gives them an ultimatum. He says, "Go back to Egypt and die,
Right.
or go be allowed, or allow Nebuchadnezzar to take you captive into Babylon for the 70 years, and you'll live. You'll have physical life." And it's kind of like Yahuwah references back to Deuteronomy, was it 28? He gives that same phrase. I give you literal life and death. Like that time it's literal, not spiritual. It's like, all right, you want to live? Go with Nebuchadnezzar. You want to die? Go ahead. Go to Nico in Egypt. Go
Slap
ahead.
in his face. That must have been for them to be
Yeah.
threatening to go back to Egypt.
And he promises them right in Exodus. He says, you'll never see them no longer. You'll never see the Egyptians any longer. And they go back on their own. He's like, but anyway, go ahead, Brother Joshua.
Does it say you'll never see the Egyptians, or does it say the Egyptians that you see here today you will see no longer?
I think it just says you won't see them any longer today. So he could have been referring to that particular generation. Yeah. But I think his ultimate will was for them to never go back to Egypt ever. Like he didn't want them, and they completely rebelled. Like I think wasn't the commandments for a king of Israel, wasn't the requirements that they don't, go back to Egypt? There was something about the Egypt thing. There's something about
I don't know that.
Multiply their horses. It talks about do not multiply his horses so they don't go back to Egypt. There's something about the horses thing that I'm trying to remember, that there's specific requirements for a king of Yasharal. But anyway, just to give a history lesson, this particular king of Egypt doesn't come about until you have like really the Babylonian captivity time period. That's when he comes about. So it's kind of good that it mentions him in this chapter. You get a kind of historical concept of when this was going on, when this apostasy was going on. So Nico's mentioned a couple times in this chapter. What's weird here, I don't know if the Son of Man is paraphrasing, but it doesn't mention Nico in verse 35, but it does in the Septuagint. So it's kind of weird that they would want to leave that out. I guess they figured that the verse prior already gives you his name, so they're taken away from Scripture. Go ahead, Brother Joshua.
I would definitely agree with you that it was not his will for them to ever go back to Mitzrayim. I would like to read Exodus 14:13 because it seems to imply more than just that. It says, "Take courage, stand still, and see the salvation which comes from Yahuwah." And this is right after they've gathered their chariots and they've camped right behind them. And it says, "Take courage, stand still, and see the salvation which comes from Yahuwah, which he will work for you this day. For in the manner you have seen the Mitzrites this day, you shall never see them again anymore. Yahuwah will fight for you, be you therefore silent." So if I'm not mistaken, after this point in time, was Egypt ever really a world power after this?
No, and they never. They kind of never got back their former esteem. I think it's even mentioned later on in prophecy that there's a parallel where it talks about that you were once great or something to that effect, and you're now just a byword of the nations. There seems to be a time where Yahuwah's even promising them when they become part of his people, they'll be great again. I forget what book it is, but it's one of the prophets. I forget if it's Isaiah or somewhere where it talks about that, their former esteem they'll have again. But it's really in the context that when they're being grafted in, when them and the Assyrians come and join themselves to his people. I don't know. I know that
14:13 could be pointing to that. For the manner you've seen the Mitzrites this day, you shall never see them again anymore.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
I
a
mean,
thought.
prevailed against the Israelites ever again. I know that. They never, even the time of Solomon, they were like very low, very lowly. They were not really esteemed. If I'm not mistaken, they actually became allies with Israel at that time period. So yeah, in that manner, they never saw them again in that manner. They never saw them as, hunting their lives and all that, or being highly esteemed among the nations. It's kind of like Babylon. When Babylon fell with not Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, but Nimrod's Babylon never rose up to its peak. It never rose up to its power that it once had originally after the flood. I mean, you had Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, but it was never like Nimrod's. It was a shell of its former self, to use a modern term. It was like a shell of its former self. And Nebuchadnezzar was a little crazy at first too. He thought he was the reincarnation of Nimrod. That's why he wanted to rebuild Babel, the Tower of Babel. Yeah, he was a little crazy at first. So yeah, I think Saddam Hussein, isn't he credited to? Saddam Hussein, who was over Iraq at one point, he wanted to. He thought that he was the reincarnation of Nimrod.
Yeah, he did.
And so
he wanted to build the gardens again and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
these people are nuts, man.
Yeah,
these people are crazy. They're, but yeah, so yeah, that was a good point, Brother Joshua. So Exodus 14:13 shows that they never saw them in that way before. I mean, again, they never saw them in that highly esteemed way again, or even in a way that they were, in fear of their lives, you could say, from the Egyptians. Go ahead, Joshua. I see your hands up again.
Did you see Marissa's comment? She asked if Nico was in Jasher.
Yeah, I addressed that. I addressed that. I was talking about how the Pharaoh and Jasher that's being talked about with the blood of the babies and all that. That's the one in Moses' time period, not Nico. That's when you read in Jasher, it talks about him. He wants to kill the Hebrew boys to bathe in their blood and all that sick occultic stuff. Yeah, it seems like what the occult do today with the adrenochrome. It goes all the way back to ancient times, and they were sick like that. These pagans were, they thought they got, because Scripture says life's in the blood, so they look at it in a perverted way. Oh, we can steal the life force from the babies.
Yeah.
And that's probably what the adrenochrome thing's about too. Because they have life in their blood. We take their blood, we can live forever. It's like a fake immortality, a counterfeit immortality. That's how they look at it. That's like vampirism is similar to that. All that nonsense that the giants brought forth. But yeah. Let me see here. Okay, so we did that. All right, so the last thing we have is Mark 16. Specifically 1-8 we have for this portion here. So it's not even the full chapter. I think mainly it has to do with the resurrection account and then going to the tomb. So that's the last part we have here for today. Any people that haven't read yet would like to read? I definitely would like everyone to get a chance to read. I know Brother Dennis hasn't read yet. Moses and Brother Moses' sister Alyssa, if you want to read, let me know. I know we got a couple other people here that haven't had a chance yet. So I don't know if Marissa wants to read, but anyone that volunteers, feel free. I'm going to be probably closing this recording quick anyway, so we'll have time for